Welcome back. How long have you been watching my channel? Let me know below.
When I was 10 years old, I won a regional math contest. One of those nerdy little things where kids with Coke bottle glasses sat in cold gymnasiums solving logic puzzles while their parents waited in parked cars outside, reading newspapers and drinking too hot coffee from thermoses. I still remember the moment they called my name, first place Claire Benson, and how something inside me burst with pride. It wasn't even about the medal. It was the first time I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could be seen. I came home with the certificate rolled up like a scroll, dreaming of pizza night or even just a good job, sweetie. Instead, I walked in to find balloons, cake, and half the neighborhood crowded into our living room. My mom spotted me and casually said, "Oh, there you are. Grab a plate." I asked what was going on, confused. She waved a hand toward Lindsay, my older sister, who was smiling like she'd just solved world hunger. Lindsay got voted best smile in the yearbook. Isn't that just the cutest thing? And just like that, whatever pride I had folded in on itself and died a quiet death. That's how it always was. Lindsay got standing ovations for existing. I got silence, maybe an absent-minded nod if I didn't screw something up. For decades, I convinced myself it didn't matter. I built a life, a real one. While Lindsay majored in communications and learned how to work a room with her bleached smile and wine laugh, I spent nights coding, grinding through failures, teaching myself to think like a machine and move like a predator. I didn't make noise. I made progress, quietly, relentlessly. I built a software company from my apartment floor, eating instant ramen while Lindsay posted charcuterie boards on Instagram. But it never mattered, not to them. Every year when Lindsay got promoted, my parents threw these ridiculous Lindsay brunches, like some kind of weird suburban royal coronation. Last year, she moved from HR manager to HR director, and there was a damn banner. Lindsay leads with love. Mom wore a sash. I'm not even exaggerating. Meanwhile, when I sold my company for just under 8 figures to a private equity firm in Chicago, they didn't even text. Not a single fucking word. I could have brought it up. I should have, maybe, but I didn't want pity. I didn't want their crumbs. I wanted them to see me the way they saw her, to look at me like I mattered more than a participation ribbon. So instead, I smiled politely and said I was doing well, even though my accountant had just told me I could retire before 40. I waited, year after year, for something, a nod, an acknowledgement, anything. It never came. Then last week, my mother called me. I almost didn't answer. Her name showing up on my screen usually meant something passive-aggressive wrapped in cheerful lipstick. But I picked up. "Oh, Claire," she said in that sugary tone she reserves for news about Lindsay. "You won't believe it. Lindsay's being considered for vice president. We're throwing a dinner Friday, just family and a few close friends. You'll come, won't you?" There it was again, that slap in the face dressed up like a hug. Just family, as if I hadn't been excluded the last 3 years in a row. I swallowed hard and said, "I'll think about it." What I didn't say was that just the night before, I'd gotten a call from a broker I knew in New York. A boutique PR firm was looking for an investor to help them restructure. Quiet deal, off-market. They wanted a buyer who understood tech, brand positioning, and had capital ready to move. I asked for the name of the firm. He said it without pause. Pendleton and Greaves. I laughed out loud. That was Lindsay's firm, the one where she was leading with love and handing out fake wisdom quotes on LinkedIn. I asked for the numbers. The firm was profitable but bloated, top-heavy, bad margins, vulnerable to a takeover if the right partner came in with the right pressure. So I made a decision. No tantrums, no confrontations, no screaming matches, or late-night phone calls demanding recognition. No, I'd do what I always did. I'd let my actions speak louder than their shallow, performative love. I'd buy the goddamn company, quietly, surgically. And when the time was right, I'd show up not as the forgotten little sister, but as the woman in control of everything. Some might say it's petty, some might say it's genius. But here's the question I have for you. If your family celebrated your sibling like a national holiday while treating you like a footnote, What would you do? Would you swallow it forever? Or would you finally stand up and make them look at you? Really look? That was the moment I knew. This year, things were going to be different. This year, I wasn't going to wait for a seat at the table. I was going to buy the damn table. And when I walked into that office, I wouldn't need them to clap. They'd already be standing. I didn't sleep that night, not really. My mind ran like a machine stuck on overdrive, humming with every possibility, every angle, every what if I could feed it. Lying there in the dark, I wasn't thinking about how to impress my mother or finally win my sister's respect. I'd given up on those fantasies years ago. I was thinking about leverage, ownership, structure, exit strategies. I was thinking about what it would feel like to walk into the lion's den, not as prey, but as the one holding the leash. The idea wasn't born out of some hot-blooded urge for revenge. It was colder than that, sharper, more deliberate, like a scalpel in a surgeon's hand. I called Rob the next morning. Rob had been with me since the early days, when the company was just a handful of developers in a borrowed co-working space, and we had to pay for coffee with loose change from couch cushions. He wasn't just my CFO. He was the only person who had stuck around through every storm, every setback, every time I came close to quitting but didn't. If anyone would talk me down from this idea, it would be him. Or so I thought. I need a few things, I told him. I need a shell structure. I need 3 layers of separation. I want no direct ties between the acquisition vehicle and my name. There was silence on the other end of the line for a long moment. Then he said, "Who's the target?" "Pendleton and Greaves." He exhaled slowly. "That's Lindsay's firm." "I know." I heard him scratching his beard through the phone. "This about her?" I paused for a long time. "No, this is about me." I could practically feel the skepticism through the speaker. "Claire, I've watched you build everything you have with precision and focus. You've never let emotion cloud your decisions. You really want to blow 8 figures on a pissing match with your sister?" "It's not a pissing match," I said, maybe too fast. "It's a move. Strategic. They're mismanaged. They've got bloat, outdated infrastructure, way too much reliance on in-house legacy systems. They've ignored the tech transition everyone else is already halfway through. I'm not torching cash. I'm fixing a sinking ship before it goes under." "You don't even like PR firms," Rob said. Deadpan, I almost smiled. "No, but I know how to make them profitable." That was enough to get him on board, tentatively. Within 2 days, we'd laid the foundation. We tapped a low-visibility holding company in Delaware, folded it under another firm we'd used for a real estate play in Dallas 2 years ago, and routed communications through our attorney, who loved secrecy as much as he loved golf. Everything moved faster than I expected. By Thursday, I had access to Pendleton and Greaves' internal data room. By Friday, I'd seen enough to confirm what I suspected. They were ripe for the taking: expensive office space, bloated executive salaries, overlapping departments doing redundant work, zero investment in automation. They had one foot in the grave and didn't know it yet. Still, none of that prepared me for the feeling I got when I saw her name in the documents. Lindsay Benson, Director of People and Culture. God, even her title made me want to roll my eyes. It was so performative, so shallow. But there it was, spelled out in corporate font. Her salary was generous, inflated even. Her perks included a car stipend, a personal wellness coach, and a monthly budget for team-building inspiration initiatives, which basically translated to overpriced personality workshops and Instagrammable office plans. I wasn't angry when I saw it. I wasn't even jealous. I just felt this deep, quiet ache in my chest. All those years they told me I was too cold, too logical, too robotic. All those years they cheered her on for having heart, as if heart was enough to run a damn company. And here I was, about to buy the building she worked in, and I still wasn't sure if that would be enough to make them see me. I kept pushing forward. By the end of the second week, negotiations were underway. The current partners at Pendleton were tired. They wanted a graceful exit, a way to keep the firm alive without doing the hard work of transformation. I offered them a soft landing, cash up front. A 2-year advisory clause to save face. No public drama. They accepted the terms with barely a ripple. Lindsay, of course, had no idea. The board hadn't even looped her in yet. Why would they? She was a department head, not an owner. I sat in the final strategy session, quietly listening as their managing partner walked us through the transition timeline. "We'll make the internal announcement next Friday," he said, glancing at his calendar. "Coincides with our VP decision. It'll be a big day around here." And just like that, the timing clicked into place. Next Friday, the day my sister thought she'd finally get her crown, I was going to be the one placing it on her head and yanking it off before it settled. As I left the building that day, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel powerful. I felt unsettled, like I was stepping onto a stage in a play I hadn't quite finished writing. Was this revenge? Maybe. Or maybe it was just reclamation. Maybe this was what it looked like when a quiet kid grew up and learned how to take what no one ever thought she deserved. Rob called me later that night. He sounded tired. "You sure you want to go through with this?" I didn't hesitate. I've never been more sure of anything. And in that moment, I believed it. Because for once, I wasn't chasing applause. I was chasing control. And control, unlike love, was something I could finally count on. The irony wasn't lost on me. How something as flimsy as a digital calendar notification could carry the emotional weight of a gut punch. How a casual message in the family group chat could do what years of therapy hadn't. Reopen the wound, wide and raw. It was Monday morning when my phone buzzed, still in the pocket of my coat as I walked into a meeting. I barely glanced at it, expecting another generic update from my portfolio manager. But when I pulled it out and saw the screen, I stopped mid-step like someone had yanked me backward by the spine. The message was from my mother. The tone was giddy, the kind she reserved for Christmas morning or finding a Chanel handbag on sale. "Everyone, don't forget Friday at 6, Lindsay's big night. Promotion party at the house. Dress nice, bring wine, and your best toasts. So proud of our girl." That was it. No mention of me. No "Claire, we hope you can come." No direct text. Just a loud digital cheer squad cheering on the same damn golden child they'd been worshipping since she first got potty trained 2 weeks ahead of schedule. I stared at the screen so long the brightness dimmed and faded. No one even thought to ask if I was available. Not that it mattered. I hadn't been invited to any of Lindsay's moments since I skipped one brunch 3 years ago. The one where they gave her a crystal paperweight for HR innovation, and I had the nerve to be in London, closing a funding round. They treated it like I'd missed her wedding. I didn't reply. I didn't react. I just stood in that hallway, letting the slow burn creep up my chest until it reached my jaw. Then I walked into the meeting, nodded at Rob, and said, "We're finalizing the papers by Thursday. I want the board vote locked in." There was something in my voice that made Rob sit up a little straighter. Maybe he sensed that the line between strategy and spite was starting to blur. Maybe he was worried, but he didn't say anything, not yet. By Wednesday, the final contracts were signed, the ownership transfer scheduled, and the transition plan greenlit. I spent the evening alone in my apartment, the skyline outside my window glittering with the kind of silent promise cities always make to the people who conquer them. My living room was minimalist, almost sterile. Everything in its place, just like me. I had built my life around efficiency. No clutter, no chaos, no drama. But that night, the silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like something waiting to snap. I poured myself a glass of wine and scrolled through the family chat again. They were posting old photos of Lindsay in her graduation gown, Lindsay holding a coffee mug that said "Boss Babe," Lindsay with her ridiculous dog and matching sweaters. My mother commented on every photo like she was the president of the Lindsay Benson fan club. My father added 2 thumbs-up emojis and a "couldn't be prouder, kiddo." I was nowhere in the thread. Not one word. Not even a passive-aggressive "hope Claire's doing okay out there and wherever she is." That was the moment I knew I wasn't going to wait for the storm. I was going to walk right into it. Friday morning, I arrived at Pendleton and Greaves at 9 o'clock sharp. I wore a tailored navy suit, hair pulled back, No jewelry but a single platinum bracelet my assistant had given me when we hit our first million in profit. I looked like what I was, the owner, not a sister, not a daughter, not a second choice. A woman in control. The receptionist was new, fresh out of college by the look of her. She didn't recognize me, which made it even better. I signed in under my alias from the acquisition papers, then walked past the open concept workspace that reeked of lavender essential oils and performative positivity. I could hear Lindsay before I saw her. That voice, upbeat, insistent, polished to a shine, had always made people lean in and listen. It used to make me feel like I was standing in her shadow. Now it just made me curious how far she'd fall. She was in the glass conference room, laughing with two mid-level associates, probably rehearsing her VP announcement speech. She didn't see me at first. I waited at the end of the hallway, letting the seconds stretch, watching the realization crawl over her face as her eyes met mine through the glass. She blinked, once, then again, like I was a hallucination. She stood slowly, the smile fading just enough to show the crack behind the performance. She walked out, heels clicking too fast, closing the door behind her like she needed a physical barrier between her world and the one I'd just dragged into it. "Claire," she said, her voice higher than usual. What are you doing here?" I looked her dead in the eye, calm, measured. "I came to see the office. You know, the one I just bought." She blinked again, the words hitting her in staggered waves. "You bought it?" I nodded. "As of this morning, I'm the majority stakeholder. I'll be sitting in on the executive restructuring meeting, effective immediately," she laughed. A short, breathless sound that didn't reach her eyes. "You're kidding." I didn't smile. "No, I'm not." For the first time in my life, I watched Lindsay Benson fumble for words. She looked like she didn't know whether to scream or cry or hug me. Her mouth opened, then shut. Her hands twitched at her sides like she was debating whether to slap me or shake mine. I leaned in just slightly and said, "Congratulations on your big day. I thought I'd finally show up for it." Then I turned and walked toward the boardroom, my heels echoing through the stunned silence she left in my wake. And as I pushed the door open, I didn't look back. The first thing that struck me when I entered that boardroom wasn't the view, though yes, it was impressive in the kind of sterile, expensive way high-rises in financial districts always are, but the tension. It wasn't loud, not theatrical or exaggerated, but it hung in the air like the scent of burnt coffee that no one wanted to acknowledge. Everyone knew change was coming. They just didn't know it would arrive in the form of me, the forgotten daughter, the overlooked sibling, now sitting at the head of the table in their precious glass kingdom, thumbing through financial statements with the quiet ruthlessness of someone who no longer had anything left to prove. No one clapped when I was introduced, and I hadn't expected them to. The old partners sat like statues, blinking through the discomfort of their own irrelevance, and the younger execs, those who still thought quarterly bonuses were signs of loyalty, looked at me with that mix of curiosity and suspicion reserved for strangers with too much power. I didn't waste time with small talk. I went line by line through the restructuring plan, outlining redundancies, optimization targets, budget reallocations. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I didn't care about their egos or their legacy. I cared about results. And still through it all, there was Lindsay, sitting 2 seats down, trying to wear the same mask of composure she always had. But this time, the edges were starting to fray. She hadn't said much during the meeting, but her silence was a performance in itself. Every time I referenced a department that needed downsizing or a process that was functionally obsolete, her jaw tightened just a little more. By the end, she looked like someone had placed a ticking clock inside her chest and dared her not to flinch as it counted down. After the meeting, I returned to the office temporarily assigned to me, previously belonging to a former partner who'd now be transitioning out with dignity, as the memo would phrase it. The room still smelled like aftershave and ambition. I didn't unpack anything. I just sat there, staring out the window, replaying the way Lindsay had looked at me across that table, not angry, not hurt, but confused. as if I had violated some unspoken family agreement by refusing to stay in my lane, as if success was hers by birthright and mine by accident. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. I didn't need to check the screen, the tone of the ring, the timing. It could only be my mother. I answered, not because I wanted to talk, but because I knew exactly what was coming and I wanted to hear it from her lips. She didn't bother with hello. She went straight to the point, her voice sharp with that particular brand of maternal betrayal that says, "I loved you, but only when you stayed small." "What did you do, Claire?" she asked, not with curiosity, but with accusation. "I bought a company," I said, flat. "You bought her company on her day." "I own it now, that's a fact." There was a pause, the kind where you can hear someone inhaling rage through clenched teeth. "You ruined her promotion," she hissed. "You made a spectacle." "She still got promoted," I replied, though we both knew that whatever shine the moment had once possessed was now gone. I just happened to be in the room when it happened. "You humiliated her." And there it was, just as I had predicted. Not one word about how hard I had worked, not a single acknowledgement of what I had built, what I had risked, what I had sacrificed. All of it erased beneath the shadow of Lindsay's wounded pride. "I didn't humiliate her," I said slowly. "I just reminded her that being beloved doesn't make you untouchable." "You don't know what you've done," she said, her voice cracking in that way that used to make me feel guilty when I was little, like I had broken something that could never be fixed. But this time, I didn't bite. I ended the call without another word and let the silence hang there like a curtain closing on a play I never agreed to be part of. That night, I walked through the nearly empty office, passing the frosted glass panels and the motivational posters Lindsay had probably helped select. Empathy is the new excellence. Kindness is strength. Bullshit dressed in Helvetica. These weren't guiding principles. They were wallpaper for mediocrity. I entered her office, not to snoop, but to see what she had made of the place. It was exactly what I expected. Stylish, curated, filled with soft edges and fake plants, the kind of aesthetic you'd find in a lifestyle blog that confused branding with depth. But then something caught my eye. A drawer slightly ajar, with a file folder inside labeled HR Confidential. I paused, not because I was afraid of what I'd find, but because some part of me already knew. I reached in, pulled the folder out, and began to flip through it. At first, it was the usual HR fluff, performance evaluations, memos about diversity initiatives. But then I found something I hadn't expected. A printed email exchange from years ago, my name in the subject line. The message was from Lindsay, addressed to her supervisor. It read, "Claire Benson applied for the open strategy role. Yes, that Claire. Honestly, I don't think she's a cultural fit. Brilliant, sure, but cold. Our environment is collaborative and values emotional intelligence. I'd recommend passing." There was a reply underneath. "Noted, appreciate the heads up." That was it, a couple of lines. A career door slammed shut with a single click. I sat down in her chair, folders still open in my hands, and let the truth sink in. Not only had they forgotten me, they had actively made sure I stayed forgotten. She hadn't just benefited from being the favorite. She had curated her success, not just by climbing her own ladder, but by pulling mine away when I reached for it. So no, I didn't feel guilty anymore. I didn't feel like a villain. I felt like someone who had finally read the last page of a book and realized she hadn't been crazy all along. And when the lights dimmed and I finally left her office behind, I wasn't thinking about what I had done to her. I was thinking about what she had done to me, and how that story was only just starting to unfold. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid of what I'd done. No, that part was long behind me. But because for the first time in years, I had tangible proof that what I'd always suspected, deep in the pit of my stomach, wasn't paranoia or bitterness or emotional exaggeration. It was the truth, plain and unfiltered. I wasn't simply overlooked. I wasn't just the quiet one, the weird one, the one who didn't cry during family movies or spend hours doing her hair for Easter photos. I had been actively, deliberately sabotaged by my own sister, the golden child, the beloved, the one whose smile could deflect criticism and whose shallow charm had been mistaken for warmth her entire life. The folder I'd taken from her drawer, it was a black and white receipt for every lie my parents had fed me growing up about fairness, merit, and familial love. I sat on my couch well past 3 a.m, the papers spread out before me like a crime scene. The email chain was short, but the damage it carried was immeasurable. I'd applied for a strategic development role at Pendleton and Greaves. Nearly 8 years ago, I'd been younger then, still naive enough to think that hard work and intelligence would open the same doors for me that charm and favoritism had opened for Lindsay. I hadn't even told my family about the application at the time. I thought it would be better to land the job and then casually bring it up during one of their brunches, like, "Oh, by the way, I'll be working at Lindsay's firm now." Some part of me believed that would be the moment they'd finally clap for me. Of course, the offer never came. I'd been told the role had been dissolved due to budget shifts. Now I knew that was a lie. I read Lindsay's email over and over again, as if repetition would soften its sting. Honestly, I don't think she's a cultural fit. Brilliant, sure, but cold. Our environment is collaborative and values emotional intelligence. I'd recommend passing. Cold. That word hung in the air like a curse, a condemnation of every strength I had built my life on. In her world, being methodical meant being unfeeling. Being rational meant being incapable of empathy. And worst of all, being independent meant being undeserving of community. But that wasn't the part that truly gutted me. What shattered something in me wasn't just the gatekeeping, it was the tone, the flippancy, as if tossing me aside was nothing more than a routine administrative task. As if I were just another resume, another inconvenience. No pause, no loyalty, no family, and suddenly everything made sense. All the moments when Lindsay brushed past my accomplishments with backhanded compliments, the way she changed the subject every time I brought up work, the way she used to say, "You know, not everything's about efficiency, Claire," with that patronizing smile, as if emotions were her exclusive domain. The truth was, she hadn't just wanted to win, she'd wanted me to lose, quietly, permanently. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual, folder in hand, coffee untouched in the cup holder of my car. I walked straight to my temporary office, locked the door behind me, and laid out the contents of the folder again on the table, this time organized in order, email chain first, followed by performance evaluations from her team. A few memos where she took credit for ideas pitched by junior employees, and a couple of anonymous complaints about her manipulative leadership style that had conveniently gone unresolved. I wasn't sure yet what I was going to do with all of it. Part of me wanted to print copies for every executive on the floor and staple a post-it on the front. "Meet your culture queen." Another part of me, a quieter, colder part, wanted to wait, to let her unravel on her own, to watch her implode not from public exposure, but from her own paranoia, as she sensed something had shifted and couldn't figure out what. At noon, Rob came into my office without knocking. He was holding a folder of his own, but the second he saw the spread of documents on my table, he closed the door and gave me a look that hovered somewhere between concern and resignation. "What's that?" he asked, nodding at the papers. I didn't look up. "It's proof." He sighed, ran a hand through his hair, and sat down across from me. "Proof of what?" I met his eyes. That I was never imagining it. That she didn't just get ahead. She made sure I stayed behind. He didn't respond immediately. When he finally did, his voice was low. "And what are you going to do with it?" That was the question, wasn't it? I didn't answer, not because I didn't know, but because I wasn't ready to speak the words out loud. I had spent so long believing the battle was over, that I had already won by buying the firm, by taking the power Lindsay never thought I could hold. But now I understood something deeper, more corrosive. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about recognition. It was about repair. And some things can't be repaired. Some wounds don't close. They just go numb. By the time Lindsay appeared at my door later that afternoon, I was ready for her. She came in with that brittle smile she always used when she wasn't sure if she was in trouble, but sensed the walls moving closer. "Hey," she said, her tone forced casual. You got a second? I gestured to the chair across from me. She sat, crossed her legs too quickly, and folded her hands in her lap like a student waiting for a grade she knew she hadn't earned. So, she began, I wanted to check in on everything. You know, with the transition, people are nervous. They don't really know what's coming. I thought maybe I could help smooth things over. Be a bridge. I studied her, really studied her. For once, I saw the cracks beneath the gloss, the insecurity hiding behind the curated confidence. And I realized with something like bitter relief that she was afraid. She didn't understand me, not really, and that made me dangerous in a way she had never considered before. I appreciate the offer, I said finally, keeping my voice neutral, but I think we're going to take things in a different direction. Her smile faltered. What kind of direction? I reached into my desk drawer, pulled out the folder, and placed it between us on the table. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I think you already know. She stared at it like it might explode. Her hands twitched. She didn't speak. And for the first time in 38 years, I watched my sister sit in absolute silence, unsure of how to spin the narrative in her favor. It was a beautiful moment. And it wasn't even close to the end. The thing about winning is that nobody ever tells you how lonely it is at the end. You grow up thinking that if you can just push hard enough, if you outwork and outthink everyone around you, if you stay late and stay quiet and keep your mouth shut while everyone else takes up space, someday you'll arrive at this gleaming place of validation, a place where everyone finally sees you, respects you, maybe even admires you. But nobody tells you that when you finally get there, the room is empty. Nobody tells you that the echo of your own breath is all you'll hear once the applause you imagine turns out to be a fantasy you invented to survive the years no one clapped at all. After the folder incident, Lindsay didn't come into the office for 2 days. I didn't call her. I didn't ask where she was. She didn't owe me an explanation, and I sure as hell didn't owe her sympathy. Let her sit with it. Let her feel what I'd spent years feeling. Uncertainty, fear, the bitter taste of being outmaneuvered by someone you never saw as a real threat. It was almost poetic, really. For once, the story wasn't about her. For once, she wasn't the hero. But the satisfaction didn't last. It never does. By the following Monday, the energy at Pendleton and Greaves had shifted. Whispers in the halls, cautious glances when I walked past. Half-hearted greetings from people who used to smile too wide and now didn't know how to look me in the eye. My changes, though practical, necessary even, were starting to shake the fragile equilibrium they had lived under for years. I slashed redundant roles, folded 2 bloated departments into one, canceled overpriced contracts for motivational speakers and team-building retreats that cost more than a senior analyst's annual salary. I hired a lean operations consultant who spoke in blunt percentages and didn't know anyone's name. And yet, no one said thank you. No one celebrated what I was doing because no one likes the person who cleans house, even if the house was falling apart. Lindsay returned midweek. She didn't speak to me, didn't make eye contact, just walked into her office like a ghost pretending to be flesh and blood. I let her be. We were far past the point of sisterly reconciliation. Whatever warmth we had shared as children, if it had ever existed outside of photo albums, was gone. And honestly, I didn't miss it. What I didn't expect, however, was Rob. He came in late Friday afternoon, looking more tired than usual, a man carrying too much on his shoulders for too long. He closed the door behind him, leaned against the frame, and stared at me in that way he only did when he was about to say something I wouldn't want to hear. "Do you have a second?" I nodded without looking up from the report in front of me. "I think I'm done." That pulled my eyes off the page. "What?" He didn't sit. He stayed standing, like putting any distance between us might soften the impact. "I mean it. I think I need to step back. Not from everything, just from this." "You want out of the firm?" I asked, slowly, carefully, as if saying it too fast might make it more real. He nodded. "This isn't what we do, Claire. This isn't what you do. You're not a vulture. You're not a saboteur. My pulse ticked faster, but my face stayed still. I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm fixing it. He tilted his head. Are you? His words hung in the air like smoke. I came here to make this company better. That was always the plan. No, he said, without venom, but with something worse. Disappointment. You came here to make a point, and now you've made it. You won. But what's the cost? I didn't answer, because deep down, I already knew. I had built a machine around myself. Efficient, streamlined, indestructible. But inside that machine was someone I barely recognized anymore. Someone who had traded recognition for retribution, love for leverage, and warmth for steel. The old Claire, the one who used to sketch out business plans in coffee shops and get excited about potential, she had been buried somewhere along the way. You got what you wanted, Rob said, softer now. So why does it still feel like revenge? He left without waiting for a response, and I sat there, alone in an office that used to belong to someone else, wondering if he was right. Not about the firm. I knew I could make the numbers work, knew I could get it back on track, but about me, about the way I had walked into this place like a queen reclaiming a stolen crown, only to discover the throne was made of glass, and every step I took cracked it a little more. That night, I poured myself a drink, stood by the window, and listened to the city hum below me. My phone buzzed on the table, one new voicemail, from Michael. I hadn't heard from him in months, not since the engagement. I hadn't even thought about him, not really, but there he was. His voice soft and cautious, laying through my speaker like a ghost I hadn't invited. Hey, Claire. I heard about the buyout. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. You always did have a way of pulling off impossible things. Look, I know I didn't handle things well, but you could have had this all, if you hadn't walked away first. I stood there letting the words settle like dust and felt nothing. Because the truth was, I hadn't walked away. I'd been pushed, and now that I had climbed back up, not to be loved but to be heard, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd built my empire out of silence. And silence doesn't cheer when you win. It only echoes. There was a particular stillness to the office that morning, the kind that settled in thick and low like fog over an abandoned highway, making even the sound of my own footsteps feel like they didn't belong, like I was moving through a space that had already begun forgetting me. The halls were too quiet. The energy changed in a way I couldn't quite name, but could feel deep in my ribs, as if the walls had started whispering things I wasn't supposed to hear. The firm was functioning, yes, more efficiently now than it had in years, but it was no longer vibrant or proud or even curious. It was obedient, careful, half alive in the way that institutions become when fear replaces ambition. And as I made my way toward Lindsay's office, I realized for the first time that I had become the reason for that silence, the weight pressing down on every voice that had once dared to speak freely. Her door was open. That alone would have been unremarkable, had it not been for what was missing behind it. The room was empty. No framed quotes on the wall, no soft lighting, no collection of self-help books, or curated stacks of magazines designed to signal intellect while never actually being read. The succulent on her desk was gone, the chair neatly pushed in, the drawers open and bare, like the rib cage of something that had been picked clean and left behind. There wasn't even a note, not a goodbye email, not a passive-aggressive sign-off to explain her absence. Just the emptiness, heavy and intentional, like a final sentence she had written in silence. I didn't need anyone to tell me she had quit. I could feel it in the way the other employees wouldn't meet my eyes that morning, in the way HR avoided my floor entirely, in the way Rob's empty desk had remained untouched since the day he walked out without a word. It had been building for days, maybe weeks, a slow unraveling just beneath the surface of all the spreadsheets and schedules and projected growth models I had been so proud to polish. They hadn't left because of mismanagement or incompetence. No, they had left because they no longer recognized the space they had once felt safe in. And that space, for better or worse, had been defined by Lindsay. I stepped into the room and stood in the center for what felt like hours, though I'm sure it was only minutes. There was something cruel in how completely she had erased herself, how deliberately she had left nothing behind for me to react to. No final insult, no dramatic flourish, just an open door and an absence so loud it rang in my ears. I ran my fingers over the edge of the desk where she used to keep her mug, the one that read "People First," and realized that even in her departure, she had found a way to steal the last word. She had left me with victory, but she had taken the stage. Back in my office, I closed the door and stood by the window, the skyline stretching out before me in all its artificial glory. From this height, everything looked so small: the people, the traffic, the stories unfolding in offices just like this one. I had climbed every rung of the ladder they never even let me near, built my own damn staircase when they nailed the door shut. And still, there I was, looking out at a city that didn't care whether I'd won or lost. It just kept moving, indifferent and unsentimental, the way cities always are. My phone buzzed. One message. It was from Lindsay. The words were brief, but not cold. "Congrats, Claire. You always were the smart one. I just couldn't handle it." There were no apologies, no explanations, no attempts to repair or even reopen whatever we once had. Just a statement of fact, one that hit harder than any argument we'd ever had. It wasn't an admission of guilt, not really. It was a recognition of reality, finally spoken without the glitter or the grin or the defensiveness that had always blurred the truth between us. She had seen me, maybe for the first time, and she had finally said it. I stared at the message for a long time, the screen glowing against the pale morning light. I could have replied. I could have written something cutting or kind, forgiving or final, but I didn't. I set the phone down, untouched, and turned back to the window, because what was there to say? To say really? She was gone. The company was mine. The family would probably never recover. And still, some part of me, the part I had built walls around for so long, wanted to ask her, "Why did you do it? Why did you make me invisible? Why was my silence never enough for you to hear me? Why did you need to win so badly that you had to erase me to do it?" But those answers, if they existed at all, would never come. Not from her, not from my parents, who still hadn't called, not from anyone. Because maybe that was the truth I had been avoiding all this time. There are some stories we never get the full ending to. Some people vanish before the last chapter. Some victories are hollow by design. And maybe that's the real price of winning on your own terms. As I stood there, letting the city buzz below me, I realized something I hadn't wanted to face until now. I had bought the company. I had exposed the truth. I had stood in the room where I was never invited and taken my place without asking. But somewhere in the pursuit, I had lost the thing I started out wanting. Not the approval, not even the love, the damn connection. And now I had the view, I had the silence, and the story was over. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe this was just the part where you walk off the stage and realize that no one's waiting in the wings. So I ask you now, would you have done it? Would you have burned the bridge to build your own throne? And if you did, would the fire have kept you warm? Or would it have left you just like me, standing in an empty room, holding the crown, and wondering why no one's clapping?